there. And that's our job, to find the numbers, to do what we say we're going to do, to work hard at it. There's a lot of numbers out there when you look at a $100 million budget, to look at how many different departments and what we're going to do. Good question. We don't have the answer. At least I don't have the answer. But that's our job, whoever you elect.
Do you have a question, sir?
My question is, I've sat in on county budget meetings, and they'll sit there. They've been there forever, the commissioners, and you'll ask, well, can't we cut their, when they come in for pay raises and stuff for the county and employees, they usually get it. Then the first thing they tell you, well, do you want your road plowed? If they don't, the first they'll kick something that ticks you off right away. What about like firing or laying off some people? I mean, would any of you be willing to cut the workforce slightly to compensate for the pay raises? Maybe subcontract, privatize some of the plowing or whatever. My dad used to plow township and county roads as a private person. He was contracted to do that. Of course, that's back in the 50s. But that could be done. And also, when there are, let's see, I lost my train of thought. Like collective bargaining, what are your positions on collective bargaining? I know the county commissioners tell you, well, that's a mandate from the state. We're screwed. Our hands are tied. Would any of you be willing to go to the Association of Minnesota Counties and start a movement to pressure our legislature and governor to stop that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a two or multi-fold question.
It is.
But I definitely, agree that if you can look at hiring some private people, and that's a great comment. And one of the things that I hope to gain tonight is, by your comments, look at what your opinions are, and to look for options and solutions. I like looking for solutions, but yeah, collective bargaining. I think there's 7 different bargaining units in Wright County. When I was hired as first as a corrections officer and then as a deputy, I didn't have a choice. I had to join the union, and I didn't agree with the way the union used my money to vote. For one thing, it's like, okay, the unions are very powerful in throwing money toward elections and that kind of thing. I think that, can't you hire an attorney or somebody that negotiates these contracts? I don't know why we necessarily have to have unions. That, I guess I addressed that on the questions and website, but as things have swung from private sector unions, which they were started for good reason, people working in horrible conditions, but now that there are more, public sector unions, I don't quite understand why, but I'd like to see the swing back.
To answer part of your question, when we look at budget, when we look at the unions out there, I'll give you a couple of scenarios. With my background in teaching and administration, we had parents that wanted to volunteer in the school, help out, do this, and it was no because of the union. The teachers union said no. I work with the city of Buffalo here. I do a lot of things with their parks, volunteer my time, and the city said, well, we got to be careful with liability. We'd like to volunteer, but we don't need you. And I said, well, that will save in the budget. And now the city has come out and said, well, the budget is really tight. Would you like to volunteer, help us with one of the parks, adopt a park? So I think with the manpower that's out there that we have as citizens, I think the answer to part of your question is we can do a lot of work keeping the budgets low if people will come forward and volunteer. The volunteer programs now in schools, the feeding program, the volunteer programs in the county, volunteer for the parks and so on. We've got to get people involved. That will keep our budget down or keep it balanced. Maybe we can cut some of the budget. But we really look at that. And now I've done that for all my life in the volunteer area. And I'm president of 2, or at least I was president of 2 different organizations. One was I-94 Chamber, had over 500 business people. We work with a lot of volunteer work in I-94 takes in St. Michael, takes in Elbert-Vale, and there's a couple other towns. I've been also president of Buffalo Chamber, and there's a lot of volunteerism that's coming forward to help with the budget. Thank you.
Well, I think to answer your question about unions, I think you've got a duplicitous relationship when you have unions electing, basically giving the politicians to elect these politicians, and then they negotiate our tax money away. Scott Walker caught a lot of heat, but he did win this second election, and I hope that's kind of a bellwether for the rest of the country that we don't want to be copped in California. Back when I grew up, I worked for Honeywell, screwing in 4 parts on torpedoes. I also worked for Control Data as a janitor. This is back in my high school days. Now, we used to have the 5 biggest employers in this country, in this state: 3M, Control Data, Unisys. Control Data used to have 65,000 employees. They made stuff. They were manufacturers. They put out products. Who's the biggest employers now in Minnesota? The federal government, the state government, Hennepin County. You look at Buffalo, we got 2 entities that are in government that are our biggest employers. There's some big problems. Now, whether you can make a case for schools, I also think we should have a better way of doing our schools where we have more choices. Those are government entities where the contracts are negotiated again by unions. That's the NEA is the biggest union in the country and the biggest buyer of politicians in the country. We need to change. We're going bankrupt. We need those dollars from 3M Company, Control Data, the jobs that went with it. Not government jobs, private sector jobs.
Okay, this is the last question. We're going to try to stick to 8 o'clock, sorry. I'm sure you can corner these guys up against the wall here and continue the grilling. So last question, Tom.
We just recently in the news, a little girl, a young lady I should say, right over on the east side of St. Paul near Harding High School was struck and killed by a legal immigrant without a license. And I believe St. Paul and both Hennepin County and St. Paul are sanctuary cities, sanctuary counties. What's your position on being a sanctuary county for Wright County?
I'd rather have you answer.
First, so we can figure out his answers.
Would you define the question a little bit more? Are you talking about
The county sheriff, the county deputies, when they pull somebody over or they give them a ticket, or even if they commit a crime, they're not asking for documentation, whether they're citizens of the United States or here legally. And that can come from a mandate from the sheriff himself, and it may come from a mandate from the county board themselves saying, hey, we don't want our officers to ask this question because we want to welcome everybody in. This is what's happening in St. Paul. It's happening in Hennepin County. I believe it's in Duluth as well, and possibly Rochester. So I'm just wondering where you stand in.
me? That's wrong. I'm a citizen. I paid my dues. I went through. My ancestors went through Ellis Island. They took the classes to become citizens. We're paying taxes. We have people infringing on us, not paying, not holding up their end, not paying into Social Security, not paying in, and they're getting by with cash. So they offered me some cash today because I did something. I said I don't take cash because they have to declare their expenses or whatever, and I have to declare their income. So, no, my answer is completely no, that's wrong. As a commissioner, we have a say, and certainly I will vote against it. There's some tough decisions that have to be made. And once you're in there, as long as I'm making the decision based upon my belief, and I think that the police or the county commission, the sheriff's department, whatever, somebody's got the wrong message for the immigrants. If they don't follow the rules when they cross the border, they're out. Unless they get their citizenship, pay their dues, pay their taxes. I answered your question. Thank you. Get better.
I hear all of our candidates talking about an immigration policy. Now, why is it that we can secure Iraq and Afghanistan's border, but not our own? And I know I've got a military background. We can seal that border in a week. And just do the same thing the Mexicans do on the south side of their border. They shoot first and ask questions later. This has got to be a tight border. If you go to, until Europe came around, if you went to Europe, you were stopped at every single place. But the fact of the matter is, the Supreme Court just said it's okay in the Arizona case to check these people for their immigration status. In fact, I've got a picture that I showed a bunch of people at one of our meetings of me with my birth certificate from St. Barnabas Hospital with a little feed on it. And it was signed by the hospital and signed by the doctor. The people that are voting, that's another problem, is our voter ID law. We got they're trying to fight that law. That law has to go into effect, and that's exactly where Obamacare goes. It puts alphabetical for all these people that walk in the door without identification. No taxes, no social security, they just walk in the door and they're taken care of. Let's find out who these people are when they walk in the door. If they don't belong here, the feds just pulled all the money from Arizona because of that Supreme Court ruling. They pulled the money out of Arizona for incarcerating these people and sending them back. So let's see, we need to change our DOJ, don't you think?
Yeah.
Eric Holder is a criminal as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, back 20 years ago, I was working in the jail, and we had a burglary of a residence, and there was 5, as it turned out, illegal aliens from Mexico. And there's, you know, we went through the whole process. I mean, they're all John Doe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, no identification. Eventually, we, you know, identified them because of warrants from actually Hennepin County. A couple of them got found out eventually who they all were. Put them on the bus. The INS picked them up, took them back to Mexico. 2 of them ended up back in Wright County a couple of years later. And I asked one of them, you know, I said, well, how long were you in Mexico? About an hour. I was in Mexico, right back again. So, and now of course it's just escalating because at least we're really, you know, trying to find these people and return them. But it's just gotten to be said. I mean, we need to crack down and take care of the people that are here that go through all the steps, you know, legally. Man, I used to work for Congressman Kennedy, and there's people that were really working hard to do everything they could to become citizens of the United States, and they're following, you know, so that just negates all these other people that just, I'm gonna just, you know, put to work illegally. So yeah, we need to be tough.
Okay. Well, that we got to cut off. Thank you. Thanks for participating in the process. I know it's not easy, and it's not it's not very common to do this kind of thing.
You put us in a hot spot.
Exactly. That was the ultimate plan. We couldn't lower the lights.